Hello, my name is Kurtis Ulrich, and I'm presenting on behalf of Dr. Iain Davidson-Hunt and Hannah Muhajarine from the University of Manitoba's Natural Resource Institute. The paper I'm presenting on considers the role of craft breweries in creating a craft food and beverage system within the Prairie region of Canada. This is part of a larger project considering innovation and small-scale food systems with cases in Canada and South America. This research is premised on the idea that small and local food producers and processors can contribute to sustainable futures. We consider innovation through the emerging conceptual framing and practice of biocultural design, which includes exploration, design, and creation at the intersection of people, values, and the biological materials of a place. This is in the attempt to draw attention to agriculture and food systems in order to support rural revitalization. In his conceptual work regarding design for social innovation, Enzo Manzini proposed that small, local, open, and connected were key elements of change towards sustainability. Other community economic development proponents have suggested that increasing the backward and forward linkages amongst enterprises can lead to sustainability in rural regions. In highly urbanized countries such as Canada, relational networks include spaces in urban settings that gather consumers interested in specific values that they want to support, creating a flow from the rural to the urban of food and beverage products. The questions we wanted to ask in our research was, is the craft brewery, brewpub, or tasting room emerging as one of these urban spaces that create linkages? Does the idea of craft include attention to the source of the ingredients being used? And is a relational network emerging with rural producers who share similar values of craft production? And if not, what are the barriers? This research is part of a larger set of cases that follow a similar methodology described in our Biocultural Design Research Guide for Innovation in Small-Scale Food Systems. Following regional scans of innovation in these food systems, cases were chosen that were underrepresented in the literature. One such innovation was identity-preserved sourcing of inputs from regional small-scale farmers. Initially, we met with government and industry representatives to create a production model for craft breweries. We developed a list of the types of ingredients that were needed and an overview of the size, growth, and current actors of craft brewing in Manitoba. From this, we developed a semi-structured interview guide that we used for interviews on 35% of Manitoba's craft breweries. Since 2009, annual beer consumption, along with domestic beer sales and beer production, have been in decline in Canada. The majority of the Canadian beer market share is composed of two beer conglomerates, Molson Coors and Anheuser-Busch. Despite the general decline in beer consumption and production, craft breweries have seen an increase in market share and liters sold. This has meant that the craft beer industry has started to have a more substantial financial impact on the Canadian beer economy. Manitoba's beer market trends have followed those of the rest of Canada. Despite a decrease in beer consumption, the number of craft breweries has been increasing. Manitoba's own craft breweries account for 3.6% of Manitoba's total beer sales. This is a 16% increase in dollar sales and a 10% increase in liters sold between 2017 and 2018. What is craft brewing? The term craft brewing has been ambiguous and hard to define in the Manitoban context. This is because there has been no move to make a legal or industry association definition. As one brewer said, you just kind of know it when you see it. In our interviews, we asked brewers what makes their beers craft. And from their answers, we distilled these 5 key values. Quality of ingredients was seen as important. as was local and independent ownership. Local had the added value of being locally or regionally distributed or sold. Diversity of the product emphasized the values of craft related to creativity, flavor, fun, and exploration. This is related to the process of brewing. Being small scale allows brewers to play around with creating different types of beer. These are mutually held values amongst craft brewers, but as of yet, there's been no move to codify them. In essence, craft brewers are those who say they are and who are recognized as being so by their peers. This is a list showing the ingredients that Manitoba's craft brewers use in their beer. The 4 primary ingredients are barley, hops, water, and yeast. Of these, we wanted to focus specifically on barley because barley is grown in the Prairie region of Canada. This is a diagram that shows the value chain for barley for a typical Manitoba craft brewery. Most Canadian barley is used as a base malt and would travel from farm to malting facility to brewery. Specialty malts typically come from Europe and would follow a similar value chain, just over longer distances. Most of Manitoba's craft breweries are urban. There is one, however, who consider themselves an estate brewery located in a rural community. As seen by this diagram, most of the processing takes place in the same business and at the same location. The only processing steps that take place outside of the estate brewery is the malting of barley and some distribution and sales. Through our interviews, it became clear that as a general principle, craft brewers recognize the value of sourcing from farmers within Manitoba. These are some of the key values that they held in relation to sourcing local ingredients. They believed in the value of using non-homogeneous ingredients, emphasizing local flavors, and ideas such as reciprocity, which is that if local breweries wanted people to buy their beer because they were local, then the breweries should also be supporting other local businesses. We want to know what ingredients breweries were able to source from within Manitoba, and it turned out that only a handful of ingredients were locally available. The estate brewery was able to source the key ingredient barley not only from within Manitoba, but they were able to grow all that they needed on their own farm. However, they are currently the only brewery using locally sourced barley. Hops was an ingredient that showed promise because it yields well in Manitoba, it's relatively easy to process, and there's a consistent demand for hops by local craft brewers. Currently, there are also 2 small-scale hop producers in Manitoba. In addition, some breweries have shown interest in using exclusively Manitoba hops in some of their popular flagship beers. Given the aspiration to source ingredients locally, why then have linkages to rural farmers not emerged? The barriers to local sourcing varied from brewery to brewery. For instance, the estate brewery experienced challenges on the farming end of their operation, specifically related to the scale of farming equipment available. Most farming equipment in Canada is designed and priced for large-scale farms. The estate brewery was able to grow a 2-year supply worth of barley on 160 acres of farmland. This is in comparison to the average Canadian farm size of 778 acres. This difference in size means that the estate brewery had to use smaller, older farming equipment that was less reliable. The issue of scale also translated into the realm of local ingredients for other breweries. These breweries wanted to use local hops in their beer, but were unable to source adequate quantities. As a result, they could only do limited runs of beer that used local hops, or they had to mix in non-local hops during the brewing process. Finding local malt is another issue. The only maltster in the province produces malt in quantities not designed for small-scale brewing. Their focus is on large breweries who want large volumes of malt. Price is another issue. craft brewers in Manitoba must compete with craft-style beer made by large beer producers. Although taste and identity play a role in what beer people buy, price also plays a large factor. As the estate brewery discovered, the identity of their beer, being made of local ingredients, does not translate into their ability to charge more for that beer. If a craft brewery must pay higher prices to use local ingredients, then that cost may translate into more expensive beer, making them less competitive with large beer producers. Through our interviews, we were able to identify opportunities that could potentially support the sourcing of local ingredients. For instance, being located in the barley-producing region of Canada could bring the advantage of being able to access different malt flavor profiles, the way wine regions produce different grapes and flavors. This is seen as potentially alluring to discerning customers. The size of craft breweries and their malting quantity requirements may also provide an advantage for locally sourcing ingredients. For instance, a local malter would not have to produce large-scale quantities of malt in order to satisfy local demand. In addition, Winnipeg brewers recognize that people are willing to pay for specialty and small batch beers, which means there's a potential market for premium malts that can be used for making these beer types. Small batch capacity also means that the volume of local ingredients needed is scalable. Limited runs, small specialty batches, or consistent small amounts of local ingredients may be supportable by this scale of brewing. For small breweries, the majority of the costs of brewing come from the labor involved. It's only in large-scale brewing where the ingredients translate into a significant proportion of a beer's costs. If a brewer were to use local ingredients, any additional costs associated with them would only moderately affect the costs of brewing, while the savings in shipping ingredients over long distances could balance out those costs. What we found in this research is that Manitoba's craft brewers have been unable to source a significant amount of ingredients for their beers. However, they still maintain a local ethic in sourcing other things that they use in their breweries, brew pubs, and tasting rooms. They collaborate with local producers, host events, and participate in local markets and pop-up shops. The efforts of these craft breweries to participate and include aspects of Winnipeg and Manitoba culture in their marketing and engagement demonstrates that they see the cachet in the narrative of local and community. They are leveraging more than the flavor and local brewing of their beer. They are actors and contributors in the community, and they understand the power that the term local embodies. There is an emerging identity of craft brewers, demonstrated by the establishment of their own association, and, as seen through our interviews, as a set of values related to the practice of craft brewing. Our findings indicate that there are two main impediments to the sourcing of local ingredients in Manitoba. First, there's a lack of what we might call a craft farmer. These are farmers who share values with craft brewers in producing quality barley at a scale significantly smaller than the current model of agricultural production. Second, there's a lack of a craft malter who can create malt at a scale that matches the production of barley in smaller amounts, while maintaining quality and the identity of the source barley. There has not yet been enough time to establish the relationships with small-scale farmers and the possibility of local malt barley production, which would create a significant demand for this type of rural product. As a result, craft breweries have had a limited impact on rural revitalization in Manitoba. However, we do believe that there is an opportunity to leverage the interest of urban consumers in craft food and beverage products. This is a place where design can play a role in thinking through the emergence of networks that go beyond the craft brewery itself and create linkages with like-minded farmers and processors in rural regions. Thank you.